Real Fishing is a fishing game for the PlayStation 1. Originally released as Fish Eyes in Japan in 1996, developed by Victor Interactive Software, a division of Victor Entertainment, and published by Pack-In Video, which merged with Victor the same month this game released in Japan. Natsume soon gained the rights to localize and distribute worldwide, changing the name to Real Fishing and publishing the game for North America in 1997 and Europe in 1998. Real Fishing is a relaxing fishing game that takes you to 7 locations and allows you to catch 8 species of fish. In each stage, there are many varieties of rod, float, hook, bait, or lure, of which the game selects a few for you to choose from that are appropriate for each stage. It is up to you to determine what style of fishing works for each stage to catch the fish you need to progress. You cast your line into various animated GIFs of serene fishing spots accompanied by relaxing music, trick the fish onto your hook, and fight it to the surface. Stages are progressed by completing parts of your fishing license, which are represented by balls on a decorative tablet, accomplished generally by catching a fish of a certain size or by catching a certain number of fish. There are 3 fishing licenses in total, which you will unlock when you fill all previous requirements and get progressively more difficult as you go. The reviews upon release varied wildly depending on where it was released. In Japan, a Famitsu broadcast from October 10th, 1996 gave the game an 8, an 8, and a 7. One reviewer said, "I believe the graphics are so realistic it really made me feel like I was fishing. Once you get the hang of it, you can catch a lot of fish." The game eventually received a reprint under PlayStation's The Best label, which is akin to Greatest Hits in North America.
Amen.
I had a difficult time finding Japanese reviews that were archived from this game, other than this one. If you know of any, please let me know. Over in America, the game received very middling to poor reviews. The most gracious review came from GamePro, who noted the game's strategy and difficulty, but suggested the game might only appeal to fishing enthusiasts. Reviewer Bro Buzz in GamePro's December 1997 issue gave it a total of 3.9 out of 5, noting that while there isn't much competition in the fishing games market at the time, the controls are simple but the action is challenging, graphics and sounds are above average, stating it feels new age with the relaxing sounds of nature. Bro Buzz also points out several technical details in the game as well, such as where Big Char hide, and Bitterling being tricky to hook. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave it a slightly more bitter rating of 6.5 out of 10, total from 4 reviewers. The higher reviewers, John and Sean, admitted that while it wasn't their bag, they enjoyed the graphics and sound, and the variety in equipment and feel of actually fishing. Greg, however, lamented how it wasn't realistic and he couldn't catch a single fish. Reviewer Sushi had the lowest score and the most to say. Sushi states they can't stand the game, calling it an unrealistic fishing game, while also stating how often they fail to catch a fish, lose their lures and bait, and fail repeatedly. They've never been fishing before, have they? After lamenting how there's no sensory feedback for tension on the line, this game released in Japan before Rumble was released on any console, Sushi ends with saying the game would be better named Carpal Tunnel Fishing. Woof. IGN gave the game a review too, an even 6. Let's see what it says. "No matter how hard I tried, I could not catch a fish. Either I suck, or the fish in this game are just way too strong. Every time I put my line in the water, the crazy strong fish would either snap my line or steal my bait. I wanted to break out the dynamite." GameSpot, however, gave the review an absolutely scathing 1.4. Josh Smith, contrary to other reviewers, roasts the game unmoving camera, incessant nature sounds, and plodding new age music. Smith goes on for several very, very long paragraphs lamenting his inability to catch any fish, listing out all the button presses you do to attempt to catch the fish, while also saying there are few moments when you're afforded the opportunity to intervene in the game at all. Pick one. He says the game sounds easy, but it's not. Fishing. And that it's hard to believe that you're really supposed to do nothing for so much of the time. Fishing. He's describing fishing. Smith's entire tirade makes me feel like he read the manual, but didn't understand the source material. Of course you keep the line taut when the fish tries to throw the hook, or it'll throw the hook. Of course you have to stop reeling fish in when it runs, because what happens when two things are pulling on either end of a line? A common thread in reviews of this game is that these reviewers were likely paid to review a game that sold exceedingly well in Japan, with the hopes that an American audience would also find the game engaging. But while the game's genre is popular at this time in America and Japan had significant overlap, fishing games hadn't quite made that leap. Or at least not for the audience of gamers that bought a PlayStation. Fishing games in the States at this time were distributed mostly by an absolute deluge of mostly mediocre Bass Rally games on PC CD, pandering to the 90s middle-age audience. Meanwhile, PS1 had a slow start in America compared to Japan, and took several years after Real Fishing released. By the time the game might have reached older audiences in America, it was several years and several poor reviews too late. I could also likely talk about the demographics of fishing as a pastime in America versus Japan, but I will spare you this essay. For now. However, despite what seems like several baseball bats to the kneecap, the game still merited a greatest hits reprint in the States when the sales requirement was over 150,000 copies. In addition, an archived version of Marvelous Entertainment's website, long story, lots of acquisitions in the 90s, states they recorded total worldwide sales of more than 1 million copies for Real Fishing. With this game releasing in the span of a year that included releases such as Final Fantasy VII, Spyro 1, and Tekken 2, obtaining these numbers was nothing to sneeze at. So, did these games journalists give this game a fair shake, understanding the source material and giving it a well thought out review? Or did they play it a few minutes, fail a bunch, get frustrated, and move on to the next video game in the pile? Ah, the games journalist's worst nightmare. The tutorial, or, in ye olden times, the manual. Let's take a look, shall we? Here, I have the manuals for both the North American and Japanese versions. The first major difference is the fish featured on the cover. In Japan, it is a rosy bitterling, while for North America, it is a largemouth bass. This game, Real Fishing, focuses more on catching a variety of fish in different locales, with different fishing methods and gear. A good fish to symbolize that to a Japanese audience would be the bitterling on the cover, a fish commonly caught via tanago fishing, which is fishing with tiny hooks for tiny fish and targeting species rather than size, and is certainly not a highly competitive derby-based fishery. Rather, the image of a bitterling may evoke posting up on a dock, casting a small rod in the water, and listening to the sounds of nature. On the other hand, for North America around this time period, most of the fishing games that gained popularity were bass derby games, such as Bassmasters Classic, Big Bass World Championship, Super Black Bass, and just a lot of mid to poor PC CD fishing games that every developer and their mother spat out to Office Depot bargain hunters everywhere. Fishing for largemouth bass was undoubtedly the key to the North American market, and so the bass takes front and center in this localization. The first big difference between these manuals, other than the cover, is that the Japanese manual is full color, while the North American one is black and white. I have the reprints of both of these games, so I do wonder if it was any different for the first printings of the North American manual. Now, before I get any further into this, I would like to thank my good friend Anime Beer Cans for the help in Japanese translation. He helped translate the Famitsu review, and he had some really good insights and resources for me to use while poking through the Japanese manual. He put out a video about the history and legal limbo of PsyOps and its cold promo CD, and you should definitely check it out. I'll have a link to his channel in the description. The manual starts off pretty stock standard, with an introduction, a button layout, and how to start the game. Then, it explains the spots in the aqua room, how to fish, a whole 9 pages in the English manual all the reviewers skipped over, and then a Q&A. There are a few differences I would like to point out though. In the Japanese manual, on the pages that describe the aqua room, there are a few screenshots of the high scoreboard. 2 of the names on the board are Sanpei and Suritaro. Sanpei is likely a reference to the manga Sorikichi Sanpei, or Fisherman Sanpei, a fishing manga that was serialized until 1983. Suritaro is likely a reference to the games of the same name, which were also published by Pack-In Video. It's a couple of pretty cool Easter eggs. The Japanese manual also features 3 pages of all the gear that is used in the game, and where and how it is used. And on page 24, there's this diagram that caught my eye. Using Google Translate, it seems to be showing how the physics of water work in this game. How there are eyes of the waves, how insects and debris get caught in certain areas, and which areas are sure to get a hit from the fish. This explanation is absent in the English manual. The Japanese manual isn't the only one with specific additions. In the English manual, it very specifically tells you about all 3 fishing licenses and how to achieve them, with the exception of the 3rd license, which it decides to leave mysterious in regards to the sizes of the fish you need. In the Japanese manual, it doesn't even tell you about Stage 7. It just leaves with a mysterious black screenshot and more levels? Finally, the Q&A section. I didn't see much in the Japanese version, but the English one has a couple cool things. For one, it specifically thanks Mark Davis, a professional bass fisherman, though it doesn't say why. I wonder if he helped with localization. And the very last question, what is the quickest way to catch fish? It says, that is not information I usually share with anyone. However, because it's my 60th birthday today, I'm feeling generous and will tell you the secret. When a fish is running fast towards the left, tap the X button once lightly. In that moment when the line is pulled tight, the fish will resist by slightly bending its body. As soon as the fish slows down, reel in the line. You should be able to pull the fish all the way to the landing spot now. Unfortunately, this technique does not work well when fishing the lake. I wonder who wrote this? Whose 60th birthday was it? And, while we're at it, who's the fishing master? This looks like a real person. Did they work on the game? Was this a developer's grandfather? I'd love to eventually find out. Well, let's move on to the game, shall we? When the game starts, you're brought to the front of the Aqua Room and asked to input your name for the save file as if it's a guest book. You then enter, get a brief glimpse around the room, before getting an intro from the fishing master. You then see the opening of the book, the Trout Stage, and then you are off to the first stage. Stage 1 is the brook, fishing for trout. In the English version, this fish is simply called a trout, while the Japanese manual calls it a yamame trout. A yamame trout is commonly called a cherry trout, and it is endemic to northern Japan. This will come back up again later. However, because this trout is native to Japan and would be unfamiliar to most English-speaking audiences, most notably North America, so the localization team seems to have settled on just calling it a generic trout. This also seems to be the only location in the game that is specifically named in the Japanese version. In Japanese, it is Yabusawa, which is a cirque in the Akaishi Mountains. This first stage serves as a tutorial fishing the game. This fish will bite everything, so this is where I'll generally describe how to play the game. Press start, and you pull up a menu where you can change your tackle, see your live well, go back to the Aqua Room, receive advice from the fishing master, and start fishing. The fishing advice from the fishing master cycles between a few hints and tips that's specific to each level, as opposed to progress-related commentary you get in the Aqua Room. Let's click Select Tackle. You can toggle between the available bait fishing or fly fishing by swapping through the rods. As you flip through them, the gear below will automatically swap. In bait fishing, you can choose your rod, float, hook, and bait. In fly fishing, you choose your fly. If you're unfamiliar with fly fishing, there are wet and dry flies. Dry flies float, while wet flies sink, or really swim through the current. In this game, the dry flies are the first few, and the wet flies are after them, going from left to right. One mindset you'll need to discard from modern games is the idea of a meta for this game. While in some stages there are better combinations, there isn't really a best combination of gear for each type of fish. Each species will bite in a certain way and fight a certain way, and whatever you have a better time hooking and keeping the fish with is the best combination for you. In a way, this is indeed realistic, as while there are optimal setups for fishing certain types of fish, you also have people out there catching sturgeon on Barbie fishing rods. So you do you.
I caught him on this. I love you and goodbye.
Take this time to fiddle with the rods and gear as you fish this first level. Let's take what we learned from the manual to the game. Exit the menu, and let's look at the brook. The game uses static images as backgrounds and gives physics to the water by animating certain parts in certain directions. You cast by pressing X, but you throw your hook further the longer you hold X. As you throw your hook, watch how it moves through the water, and watch for where the fish appear. If your hook floats off screen, it will be automatically reeled in. You can move the rod left and right to nudge your hook, and if you're using flies, you can hop the fly across the surface of the water. When bait fishing on this level, a nibble on the bait will pull you into an underwater view with the bait floating through the water. By pressing X, you can make the bait move up so it doesn't hit the floor. When it approaches the fish, wait for the fish to take the bait, and then press X to hook it. Fly fishing is slightly different. Using dry flies, a nibble means you need to press X ASAP to hook the fish and be transferred to an underwater fight scene. Wet flies work like bait does, and you'll be transitioned to an underwater view to hook the trout. Be careful moving bait or flies near the trout, as this might scare it away. The trout on this level are hard to scare, but is important to keep in mind for other levels. It might take you a couple of tries to get the timing down for hooking the fish. When the trout is hooked, let the fight begin. The trout will immediately make a break for the left. Do not touch anything. A common complaint from negative reviews is that the line would always snap. This happens when you try to reel in fish while it is running. Think about it. What happens when you have a fine line and two things are pulling on it from either end? Right, it snaps. While modern fishing games have a UI, this one does not, and you also cannot change your line weight. To prevent snapping, when the fish runs, just let go. When the fish slows down, press and hold X to reel the fish in. When the fish arches and makes a run for it again, let go. The fish might also try to throw the hook, which shows when the fish stops running and thrashes back and forth. Stop reeling and press and hold up to keep your rod up and your line tight. Rinse and repeat. Get the hang of responding to what the fish does, and soon you'll be reeling them in no time. The goal is to reel them in to the top right of the view, which will result in a transition back to the nature scene and a splashing visual and sound effect. Press X quickly to get the fish out of the water. When you do, you'll be presented with a fish's size and two options: put in the live well and release. The live well allows you to keep up to 2 fish, which you can choose to release later or put in your tanks in the aqua room. Releasing just releases the fish. To complete this stage, catch 10 trout. Second stage is a stream, where you'll be catching char. In the Japanese version, this is likely a subspecies of the white-spotted char, called the kirikuchi char. This char was listed as endangered 2 months before this game came out, and stays endangered today. Grants, restoration, and research projects benefiting the fish are still ongoing. In the American versions, this is also just called char, and the localization works well because the Arctic char, more familiar to North American audiences, also resembles the in-game model well. The equipment for this level is the same as for the previous level. However, the char will fight you more, are trickier to hook based on the type of bait you use, and tend to stay in certain regions of the map. For this level, stick to learning how to use your dry flies. You might have not used them as much in the previous level, but now you have to. Char like to steal your bait, and will refuse to get hooked on wet flies. Cast to the upper left side of the map, and let your fly drift with the current. Experiment with rods for distance, and places to cast that let your fly drift to where the fish are. To complete this stage, catch a char larger than 9.8 inches. Stage 3 is at the creek fishing for bitterling. In the Japanese version of the game, this is tanago, meaning bitterling. There are many species of bitterling endemic to Japan, but this appears to be the Japanese rosy bitterling, and is featured on the cover of the Japanese manual for the game. The bitterling is also the namesake for the Japanese method of tanago fishing, or microfishing. If you'd like to know more about that, check out this short under 3-minute video by Great Big Story. In English, this fish is also just called a bitterling. While there are no native species of bitterling in North America, the fish is pretty distinctive in shape and would have been difficult to call something else. So, bitterling it is. This level, you'll be doing your own tanago fishing, using bamboo rods and bait only. The hook will float towards the back of the map, and most of the fish seem to hang out around the banks. I like to drop my hook at the very bottom of the map and let it float along the bank, while bumping the rod left and right to entice bites. When a bitterling bites, you'll be transferred to an underwater scene. If the bitterling doesn't immediately see your bait, you can jiggle it to get the fish's attention. The bitterling nibbles on the bait before it bites. A good rule of thumb is to wait until you see the bubbles from the fish biting and then press X to hook. A millisecond too late and it will take your bait. To complete this stage, catch 20 bitterling. Stage 4 is the lake fishing for carp. In the Japanese version of the game, it is called Harabuna, which is the Japanese crucian carp. Animal Crossing fans might be familiar. In English, it is just called a carp, but given the similarity in shape, as well as fishing methods, with the domestic strain of common carp, localization of this one was pretty simple. This stage doesn't give you many options for your fishing gear. You're using a dough ball and a jigging rod. You can change the float and type of hook, but this doesn't seem to matter much, though perhaps fewer fish threw the hook when I used a barbed one. As you toss the rod in, the float will begin to drift out towards the weeds. You can bump the float left and right while it's drifting, and when a carp bites, one of two things will happen. The carp will nibble, and you'll get to the underwater view, where you will need to hook the carp after it starts visibly nibbling on the dough ball, or the bobber will be pulled underwater, and you need to press X to immediately start fighting the carp. You need to keep your eyes peeled, because if the bobber does go under and you don't press X, you'll lose your bait. Or if you do press X when you get the underwater view, you might scare the carp away. I had the best luck casting out in the bottom right area and jiggling the rod. If it's getting late in the day and your bites are slowing down, just head back to the aqua room and then head back to the pond for a brand new day. To pass this stage, you need to catch a carp larger than 11.8 inches. Stage 5 is the lake fishing for black bass and bluegill. The name is the same in both Japanese and English versions. Black bass is a common name for about 9 species of bass, but is more than likely meant to be the good old largemouth bass. Neither largemouth nor bluegill are native to Japan, but are introduced species for the purpose of sport fishing. This level. Oh, this level. So, this level is only lure fishing, and you can choose between a bait caster and a spinner rod. Neither seem to make much difference in casting, so pick your fave. Each of the lures behave differently, or are supposed to, and attract the two fish in different amounts. In reality, all baits need a steady reel in on the top and have slightly different behaviors when hooking fish. The popper, frog, and floating minnow are topwater baits, meaning you'll have to hook the fish on the surface with X, and then it'll transition to an underwater fight. The other lures will transition you underwater to hook the fish. Unlike with previous levels, you have multiple opportunities to hook a fish with the lures. If the fish flees, continue slowly reeling in the lure, and the fish is likely to strike again. Note, you can get your lure stuck on the reeds and lose it. Be careful casting there. Some of the lures attract more of one species than the other, but usually larger lures attract bass and smaller ones attract bluegill. The best ones I found for bass are sinking minnow, floating minnow, buzzbait, spinnerbait, frog, craw, and rubber jig. For bluegill, deep diver, spinner, fly spinner, jigging spoon, and grub. The popper is about half and half, and while the spinners caught mostly bluegill, I still caught large bass on them, so don't count them out. To unlock the next level, you need to catch a bass over 15 inches. There is also another requirement to unlock the second fishing license, which is a bluegill over 9.1 inches. Stage 6 is the Beaver Dam with bait or fly fishing. This stage has localized the fish, with the English version in-game using sea trout, while the manual calls it a cutthroat trout. In the Japanese version, the fish is an amago, or a southern cherry trout. You might be thinking, hey, wasn't cherry trout the one in the first stage? Correct. Cherry trout is a common name that is assigned to two different but visually almost identical salmonids in Japan. The yamame from the first stage is endemic to northern Japan, while the amago is endemic to southern Japan. The amago, however, has red spots dotting its body, something that you can see in-game. These two species do not intermingle in the wild. A shout out to a blog post by Louis Cahill called Trout of Japan for this distinction. It helped a lot. For this species, the trout are fast, strong, and flighty. Your windows for reeling them in and letting off the reel when they break and run are very small. Reel in while they run a half second too long and they'll throw the hook or break your line. Get ready for frustration, as the requirement to pass this first time is 5 fish over 9.8 inches. You are given the option of bait or fly fishing. However, the trout are so flighty that I could almost never get one hooked with bait or wet flies. No matter how much I swapped up my gear, they fled 99% of the time and stole the bait the other 1%. Stick with the dry flies at this level, the brown parachute or elk hair fly. For dry flies, you click X when the fish nibble on the fly, and if you hook, you will immediately be fighting the fish. Because of the strength of this fish, do yourself a favor and save, if you can, while you have both of these flies. Because if you lose them, you will be stuck without them for a while. It was far easier to save beforehand and then reload if I lost the flies. For the fight, you have to be quick with reeling them in, and quick with releasing the reel when they run. I found that it helped to watch the background instead of the fish, and tip your rod up the moment it slows down, so that if it decides quickly it would rather run, you would be exerting less tension on the line and are less likely to snap it. Then, let go if it runs, or start to reel it in if it goes to the right. Other than that, get ready to fight a lot of fish and lose a lot of fish before you clear this level. Now that you've caught your 5 sea trout, where's Stage 7? Well, you have a couple more requirements to unlock Stage 7. There's 2 more balls on your fishing license to fulfill. One is to catch a bluegill over 9.1 inches in Stage 5, and the other is to catch and release 100 fish total. The fish you put in your live well do not count, even if you release them later. I personally padded this out in the Bitterling Stage, but of course choose your favorite. Once you've reached this requirement, you'll head to the fishing license in the aqua room and see that the balls are gone and the center mark is now gold. Congrats, you started your second fishing license, and you still don't have access to Stage 7. Now you have unlocked larger fish. Yes, the fish are locked to only be a certain size until after you've finished a license. Think of it like Pokemon gym badges. You don't even have enough skill to control this big trout. Or something. Anyway, you have 7 more requirements to unlock Stage 7. A trout at Stage 1, larger than 13.8 inches. A char at Stage 2, larger than 19.7 inches. A bitterling at Stage 3, larger than 3.1 inches. A carp at Stage 4, larger than 17.7 inches. A black bass larger than 23.6 inches, and a bluegill larger than 11.8 inches in Stage 5. And finally, a sea trout larger than 13.8 inches at Stage 6. Now that you've unlocked this stage, get ready for the boss fight of this game. The only requirement to complete this stage is to catch a salmon. That's it, just catch one. Skip the bait and wet flies and go dry flies with this one. Do yourself a favor and, like the previous stage, save before fishing and then reset if you lose all your dry flies. Now, the species. While adult salmon are hard to tell apart, especially on the graphics resolution of the PlayStation, this is most likely, you guessed it, the cherry salmon. What? Again?
Oh shit, here we go again.
But, unlike the imago and yamame subspecies, which are both landlocked, this is likely what's colloquially called the sakura masu, because they run when the cherry trees blossom. Also, because of the similarity to species common in America, this was an easy localization to just call salmon in North America. North Americans might also be familiar with this name difference in reference to rainbow trout, where the ones that migrate out to sea are often called steelhead. Once you've reeled in the salmon and have headed back to your aqua room, you'll be greeted by a congratulations by the fishing master and sent to the credits. Once the credits are done, the fishing master will tell you that you can become the fishing master. Visit your license to get the completion jingle, exit out, and click again, and you'll see a 3rd fishing license has appeared. The fishing master does not give you any hints as to how you become the new fishing master. Instead, we head back to the manual, which states, go back through stages 1 through 7 and try to catch the biggest fish possible. Oh boy. So, there's only one way I found out what these sizes were, and it's thanks to achievements listed on retroachievements.com. Thank you to user Fridge for uploading these. The requirements are Trout 15.7 inches, Char 23.6 inches, Bitterling 3.9 inches, Carp 19.7 inches, Bass 27.5 inches, Bluegill 15.7 inches, Sea Trout 15.7 inches, and Salmon at 23.6 inches. Once you've gone through and caught all of these fish, congratulations, you're now the new fishing master. Return to the aqua room to find the music has changed, click your license to get a visual of completion, listen to the old fishing master, and now you have 100%ed real fishing for the PS1. Congratulations. I picked up Real Fishing for my first fishing game retrospective because it seemed like a well-liked game that still holds up today, but one that I had not personally played until now. I wanted to start near the beginning of fishing games' popularity, but not pick a game that was too obtuse. As a result, I found a fishing game I really like. I discovered retro achievements in the middle of playing the game, so I of course had to immediately 100% the game again, so I could get those sweet, sweet chivos. I also found the game less frustrating on a second playthrough, which makes sense, but reading through my script and seeing what I had written as I played, I hope gives you a good idea of what to expect on your first time through. On a second time through, I had much fewer frustrations towards the lake level and sea trout. That being said, it wasn't unfair or brutally difficult, but something frustrating that you can learn from and overcome, which feels good. Overall, the simple gameplay, variety of species, and serene locations makes this a very relaxing game to play. There's no derby, no announcer, no bright graphics, so if that's something that turns you off of fishing games, give this one a shot. In addition, Real Fishing is very easy to obtain. You can get it complete for under $10 or disc only for under $5. It's also easily obtainable from other venues. I only ask that you give this game more of a shot than English Game Journalist did. Thank you so much for watching. If you got this far, hopefully you enjoyed it, and you can give me maybe a like or subscribe. It is my first video about a game. In addition, I also got laid off in the process of making this video, so if you do enjoy it and have a couple bucks to spare, my coffee is in the description. If not, I hope you have a great day regardless, and hopefully I'll see you in a future video.